Welcome, everyone, to this office hours on Where Searchers Go Wrong. My name is Will Smith, and I'm the host of the podcast, Acquiring Minds. Today's session is with Chelsea Wood. Chelsea's, of course, the co-founder and managing director of Acquisition Lab. Acquisition Lab, you've heard on Acquiring Minds many times. It's a cohort-based education community for serious, aspiring business buyers. Many successful grads of the lab have appeared as Acquiring Minds guests. And Chelsea, as managing director of the lab for 5 years, has witnessed the searches of hundreds of aspiring buyers and had calls with thousands of them. So she knows what separates those who succeed in closing their deal from those who don't. And so we're going to do a presentation. She is going to do a presentation on that topic for today's office hours. This is actually part one. We're making this a two-parter. Today is part one. Part two is going to happen in December. We decided, Chelsea, on December 9th. I will put a link to, was it the 9th?
No,
12th, excuse me.
12th.
The 12th, excuse me. And I'm going to put a link to that in just a second to your chat, everyone. So you can go ahead and pre-register for that. That'll be part two of today's presentation. As always, we're going to leave questions. We're going to leave time for questions after Chelsea's presentation today. So the second half should be Q&A. Use Zoom's Q&A feature to submit your questions during or after the presentation. And we are recording, as always. You'll get a link to that recording in your inbox soon. I have help with me getting those emails out now, so they come a lot quicker. And finally, those links in your chat are there. That is a link to a promotion for Acquiring Minds listeners and Acquiring Minds webinar attendees for the Acquisition Lab's Acquisition Insights course, a shorter course than their main cohort-based course, but it otherwise costs $99, free to all of you. Grab that there. Connect with Chelsea on LinkedIn. And there is also the link to part two of today's presentation, which you can go pre-register for. I think that is it. Chelsea, did I miss anything, or is it your turn?
You will get a copy of my slides, because we always get that question like immediately. And so, yes, totally. I will send out a copy of my slides after the session.
Beautiful. Great. Okay. Over to you then, Chelsea. Take it away.
All right, perfect. So I promised Will that I'm going to try to talk slower. So if you're in the lab and you hear me talking slow, don't think I'm having a stroke. I'm intentionally going to try to slow down. So tonight or today, I want to talk a little bit about where searchers go wrong. I don't know why people succeed and don't, like, scientifically, because I haven't studied that, right? But I can tell you some of the things that I see people doing that could potentially make their acquisition harder, right? Longer, riskier. And so that's really what I wanted to talk about. Okay, so I want everyone to kind of anchor in the fact that psychology is the foundation of decision-making around deals, right? And so everything that you do is extremely people-dependent, right? It's relationship-focused, it's highly emotional. And so that's really where I wanted to anchor in. It's not just me kind of rambling things off. It's me saying what I know based on being a psychologist and what I've seen demonstrated through, 800 plus members of the lab, plus all the conversations that I've had. And so I had too much stuff and I wanted to make sure that I was providing enough information to still be action oriented. And so I just cut the agenda in half, and I'll cover the rest next month on office hours. And so this time I want to talk about how to lower the risk of your acquisition strategy. I want to talk about why broker outreach email campaigns are low return on effort. I'm slowing down. I realize I'm talking fast. How to win over brokers and sellers. And so that's all I want to talk about today. And then next month, I'm going to talk about how to know when the threat in a deal is actually real, how to prepare for winning seller meetings. I want to talk about how to determine what to actually offer a seller. And then I want to talk about how to improve your investment post-close. And so I think it's really important for everyone to recognize that buying a business is crazy, right? It really is, but it's a good kind of crazy. It's why a lot of people will join a lab, right? Because it's hard when you don't have anyone in your network to talk to and everyone thinks you're insane for going and doing this thing. but it is high risk, but it's also high reward, right? If it's done well. And so we always say in the lab that the goal is to buy a business, but not at the risk of making a mistake. When someone joins the lab, our primary responsibility isn't to convince anyone to buy businesses. That is not why we're here. We want to support those who have made the decision to buy businesses so that they can do it in the least risky way possible. And so let's talk a little bit about how to go about lowering your risk in your acquisition strategy. There is a lot of confusion, in Chelsea's opinion, being caused by information bleeding over from search fund-based guidance. And so when I have calls with people applying to the lab, often I'll hear like concerns around searching full-time, concerns that they have to be willing to move anywhere, concerns that they have to be very specific in what they're searching for. My most recent one that seems to be pretty consistently mentioned on calls the last like 2-3 months, so must have been viral somewhere, is that you can't acquire less than $1 million of EBITDA. And so all of those are very specific to search fund criteria, which is different than a self-funded searcher. So that's one area that's a challenge. The other area that I see is we have a lot of people that are super excited about buying businesses, and they're very confident in their ability to execute because they have a very broad base of experience that they've used to help other people make a ton of money in the businesses that they've supported. I'm a superhero nut, and so it makes no sense, but I call it the Superman complex. And it's really the mindset, like, I can do anything. And so you're looking at listings, and every listing's like, yeah, I could do that. I could do that. I could do that. And you're just going through listings, constantly feeling like you could do anything. And so it actually causes you to start to spin and not know what you should be doing. And so then it's like you go to the magic X ball, as I call it, instead of the magic 8 ball, to try to figure out what should you be buying. And you see the laundry list of people on social media telling you to buy HVAC and plumbing and roofing and electrical, all the same things that we've been hearing for years, right? Which is fine if that's actually what you should be buying. But I think it's really important to think about risk when you're building your acquisition strategy, right? Like at the base of your strategy, you're buying a business, which is already very risky, right? It's not more risky necessarily than a startup, but it's still risky. It's much more risky than just taking a corporate job with a steady paycheck, right? There's a lot of risk that's inherently baked into the strategy in and of itself, right? And so when you're doing this, you have to think about all those risks that you're just stacking on top of each other and try to minimize what you're putting on there. And so a lot of times I'll talk to people that are like, well, I'm open to traveling. Like if I have to buy a company in New Jersey, I'm in California, I'll just travel there, once a month or, 3 weeks out of the month and come home on the weekends or whatever it is. That's a risk, right? That's a big risk actually, but I won't go into all that detail today. Or, I'm going to buy this company and I don't know it, I'll learn it. I'll hire agencies to do growth strategies. That's another risk that you're stacking on top of that, right? Not to mention you're taking on debt. So that's a risk, right? The fact that the business is going to decline initially because of changing the system, that's a risk. The fact that your working capital is probably going to be too underestimated. So you're going to have, some working capital challenges right away. That's a risk. And so it's just in the lab, our approach is trying to make sure that you are stacking as little risk as possible. So we would never recommend that you acquire outside of your geographic area because it's just not necessary. Because again, the goal is to buy a business, but not at the risk of making a mistake. So in my experience, it's really important to keep your job, actually. And so, and Walker's actually kind of walked back on his advice after hearing, him and I debate it in front of our lab members a few times. My experience with lenders, it's not that they won't lend to you. That's fine, right? It can work. It just makes it harder because if you don't have secondary income to cover your living expenses, then your living expenses become operating expenses, and it makes debt service coverage ratio that much more complicated, right? Because when you're buying a business, it has to serve that DSCR for the last 3 historical years typically. And so you're just adding additional expenses there that's just going to make it that much harder to find a business that meets the criteria. So it's not like it's impossible, right? It's just another risk, right? It's putting another barrier in front of you to make your search harder. And so if you aren't searching full-time, because there are benefits to searching full-time, and if you have secondary income, go all day, right? That's fine. But if you're not searching full time, then you have to make searching one of your top 2 priorities, right? There's a lot of competing priorities that make searchers take longer. And so it might mean that you're missing kids' games or date nights, or you're staying up late, or you have to call off work to go handle something, in your search. It has to be a top priority for you. As long as you're not buying a company in like rural Idaho, I don't know why I always say Idaho. I don't even know if it's that rural. I've never been there. But if you're buying a business in a community without a lot of commerce and without a lot of businesses, then yes, you likely will have to buy outside of your geographic area. But 99.9% of lab members are geographically based in their search. They are anchored, they have roots, they do not want to move, and it's fine. Right? Again, you're trying to buy a business where there's a gazillion businesses. Small businesses are pretty much everywhere. And so there's just no need, right? Buying outside of your geographic area, especially for your first deal, is just more risk that you don't need to introduce. Look at what repeatable success looks like for you, so that you can find a business that needs what you already have done well. And that's what you buy, right? You don't go buy based off of a list you saw on Twitter. And then this is a really big one that I've started talking more about on strategy calls with lab applicants. It's fine if you want to target $1 million in EBITDA, but you can because there is inherently less risk, right, from a business maturity standpoint in a business of that size. However, if you are not the right buyer for that business because you lack the experience and skills to actually operate a company of that size and own and lead a company of that size, it can quickly go to zero just as fast as any other business, right? And so if you've never made, like I had a person that applied and had never worked, period. They wanted to buy a massive company. That's not a good idea, right? If you've never managed a group of people, if you've never had budget oversight, going and taking on a very large company is just introducing a lot of learning curves. Again, not saying you can't do it. Anybody can do anything that you put your mind to, ask your parents. But it's just saying it's more risk than is necessary, right? If you're trying to do this, especially with personally guaranteed debt, because bankruptcy is real, you want to do it as least risky as possible. If you guys are doing it with cash or seller financing, I guess do whatever you want, right? Because the risk is different. The next thing that I want to talk about is why broker outreach, like email blasts, are typically low return on effort. It's when you're figuring out your outreach strategy or how to get deal flow, it's really important that you don't take the path of least resistance. A lot of times when people are struggling with their search, I'll ask, how's deal flow going? Like, where are you looking? And 9 times out of 10, it's always, well, I check, the standard websites, BizBuySell, InterXO, BizNexus, that kind of stuff. And that's it, right? I check for new stuff, but there's not a lot of new stuff. That's not the right path. You can still do that, but you need to be looking and going where the deals are, right? And that is hard because there's probably 10,000 brokers now, honestly, that have deals. And so you want to be building relationships with them, as well as lawyers and accountants and wealth planners and anybody that knows business owners, right? It is a numbers game, right? The more connections you're building with people, again, going back to the psychology of it, right? The more relationships you have, the more likely you are going to be getting deal flow. And so I just wanted to raise this point because I raise it with our lab members a lot. There is decades of scientific research showing that if you are not directly connected to someone's priorities, you're not going to get a good return on your effort, right? They're not going to respond because it's not important to them. We are driven as humans to do the things that are directly related to our strategies or to our priorities, to our goals. And that means just broad blank calling a broker and saying, hey, I want to buy a business. If it's not, hey, I'm looking at your listings and I want to buy that business, they're probably not going to pay attention. Not saying they won't. We have lab members that do this all the time and brokers reach out, but a lot of times the brokers reaching out aren't the busy ones. They're not the ones with high quality, listings like abundance and huge connections to the community. Those people don't need to take your call, right? And so you want to get on their priority list, right? You want them to call you with pocket listings. That's what we see time and time again. And so I'm not saying don't do email outreach. I'm just saying to make sure that you're doing all of it, right? And go where the majority of the returns are going to be, which is going to be with brokered listings, right? Specifically listings that are on the internet already, or that brokers have in their listing database already. It's really, really, really noisy in this space, thanks to the joys of social media, telling everyone and their brother to go buy businesses. And so you desperately need to stand out in a very, very crowded market. Because brokers have a hard time understanding if you're somebody that's going to be calling them trying to buy a business with no money down, or if you're somebody calling them with 20 years of executive experience and money. And so everything you do needs to scream that you're the buyer, right, that they want in their network. And so let's talk about how to win over brokers and sellers, right? That it's anchored, and this is why we do the intensive the way that we do and why it's not all self-paced, because I truly in my heart believe that the core of doing this well is having a really strong brand. And that starts with having a clear and concise target statement. And I'm not saying you have to, when I say clear and concise, I don't mean I want to buy an HVAC company. It doesn't have to be industry specific. It just has to be clear what you're looking for. You want to have proof of funding. You want to have proof that you can actually run a company. And you want to be very trustworthy and effective in your communications. But at the core, what you want them to see when they look at you is decisiveness, that you're driven to close, and that you're adaptable, right? Rigidity will kill all interactions with folks. At the end of the day, if you remember nothing else from me, you have one job, and that is not to be forgotten, right? And people will talk to me about their target statements, and they are like 10 lines long, and there's all this noise in there about criteria that they're looking for that basically just tells the broker you're looking for a unicorn. And anybody that knows anything about primacy and recency effect in how we process information will remember that you only remember the beginning and the end of what you hear. And so if you tell somebody a ton of stuff, they're just not going to remember it. So you keep it nice and tight. They're going to remember you, and they're going to call you when they have something of interest to you. You want to come off as a serious investor. And the way that you do this is managing your brand, right? It's like every interaction is a sign to brokers and sellers and lenders, honestly, about how easy it's going to be to work with you. There's a lot of people in this market. You want them to want to work with you. And so the ways that brokers and sellers can kind of see this is like, and I can't say this enough, are you like redlining an NDA and like picking it apart? Because that's not a great sign, right? Are you asking 60 questions before even submitting an LOI? What kind of questions are you asking? Are you asking like very inappropriate questions for the stage of the process you're in? What steps are you requiring in order to actually submit an LOI, right? Those are the ways that you can very easily kind of damage your brand. So let's assume you're doing everything right and they give you a chance and you've moved through the process and you're ready to like actually evaluate the deal. I think it's really important to recognize that an LOI is not that serious. I am not over here telling you to go and I'm filtering myself, send LOIs to everyone in the world. Like you should never submit an LOI on a business you're not seriously considering. Never, Chelsea's opinion, submit multiple LOIs and like pick one. That's just disrespectful and not something you would want done to you as a business owner. And again, Chelsea's opinion, I feel like this is what's wrong in the market is people will get under LOI somehow with like no idea of how they're going to finance the deal. That exhausts everyone. The entire ecosystem gets killed by that. So please don't be one of those people. But LOIs are not that serious, right? Like I would view, a lot of people say like your LOI is like an engagement ring. It's not. It's like a promise ring that you give your girlfriend or boyfriend or partner in high school, right? It's like, I kind of like you based on what I see and I'd love for us to be together, but like I need more information, right? So what information do you need, right? I cannot tell you enough of what first-time buyers and second-time buyers, the difference between those two groups. Once you buy one company, it's really, brokers will be kind of falling over themselves because they know that you know the process. First-time buyers will blur needs and wants heavily. And so it's really important for you to understand what you actually need to submit an LOI, right? You need P&Ls, you need tax returns, ideally, if you're using financing, so that you can confirm that the business is financeable, and you need the business summary. There is an assumption here, guys, that the business summary isn't shit. Oh, sorry, that it isn't bad, right? That it's actually got valuable information in it, which I can't speak to being true all the time. And so big caveat here that you need a complete business summary, right? One that tells you about the business and gives you a decent understanding of it. If you don't have that, then some of this goes to the side, but let's talk about what you do then. But a lot of people will want to debate add backs and EBITDA and SDE. They'll want to dive deep into financial performance before even submitting an LOI. They'll want to get into like detailed information around contracts and things. The thing about this process is that you have to assume it's all true. So like debating it is not what you're there for, right? You are there to react to the information being presented to you by the seller and the broker and looking at it going, I mean, if all of this is true, yes, I want the business. And that's when you submit your LOI. Everything else is like on a sheet of paper for you to decide, what has to be true for you to move to the next step, right? Once you're under LOI, you have that list of concerns, right? And maybe it's validating the SDE, right? Then you tackle that before you even hire a due diligence team, right? Maybe you have concerns about customer concentration. So then you'll dive into that if it's not already provided in the CIM, right? And so the goal is to go under LOI quickly, right? So that they take you seriously and so that you don't lose deals. And then to eliminate it quickly if it doesn't meet your needs, right? And that way you're also not getting lost deal costs, right? So you have a list of kind of go, no-go decision points, and you go and that's preliminary due diligence, right? And then once you check all that off, you're ready to say, yes, let's go. And then you hire your due diligence team. And so if you want to have a solid brand, act expeditiously and intentionally throughout the process. And so I just wanted to, this is a little off topic, but I just think it's important, again, from a psychology perspective, when you start asking questions that are perceived as inappropriate, it's very like borderline violating to people, right? Treat it like asking for, financials or asking to like access vendors is very common, right? We'll hear, or like I need to talk to the employees during due diligence. All of that makes everybody's amygdala, like the lizard brain, trigger, right? It triggers your security and your safety alarms, and you don't want to do that, right? It puts the transaction at risk. And so when you're under, like, picture you're a small business owner and you're under LOI with a buyer and people are asking for things, what would feel reasonable to you, right? And you have to think about the long-term implications. And so the three that I have on here, I hear a lot from members, and I know that it feels painful that sometimes you can't do these things. You can do them in kind of less risky ways. But let's just say the deal falls apart. So the person you're thinking about selling to walks away, and now your vendors, your customers, your employees are all aware the business was for sale. You have now put your entire historical performance at risk because that will trigger all of their security is triggered, right? Which means they're all flight risks. And so that's why it's not always easy to talk to getting these answers. And so you kind of have to do it in covert ways. Rather than being very overt. But it's still like you should still expect to do site visits and operational reviews and talk to key employees and have like in detail information for due diligence. It's just these things are actually risk stacking for both the seller and you. So you just need to be mindful. Because again, the goal is buying a business, but not at the expense of making a mistake. So hopefully kind of your primary takeaways and kind of practical tips that I want you to walk away with is to avoid stacking multiple high-risk characteristics for your first deal, right? Which means buying outside of your geographical area, buying something that you have no transferable skills to operate, buying a business that is declining, that kind of stuff, right? And we talk a little bit about kind of the neuroscience of how you process information in the lab and how that can be a challenge. But just be careful, right? When you're evaluating listing that you're thinking about the risks, right? And that you're minimizing that as much as you can. Also, when you're reaching out to brokers, connect about a listing they have, be concise, show them that you're the buyer that they want so that they will put you on their listing in their listing database and call you when they get pocket listings. We get so many members that will get pocket listings by doing this. That it really is going to be the highest return on your efforts. Still okay to do, blanket emails if you really want to, but this is going to be a much higher rate of return but it's much more tedious. So people resist doing it. But it will build out in folds, I promise. Build a brand of confidence to close and seriousness. That is core what they are looking for and will set you apart from everybody else. And then be mindful about what's appropriate for the various stages of the deal that you're in. Because it's just hard, right? You can kind of push too hard and almost feel a little bit like a bulldozer when you're asking for questions. Like I keep wanting to use an analogy and I can't think of one that's less vulgar, but it's like you don't want to, like, you're basically getting under their skirt. I don't know how else to say it, right? And so you have to be very careful with what you're asking for because it can be very off-putting, right? Like it can make people step back and start to push back against you, and you don't want to lose your deal. So be mindful about what you actually need in order to take the next step of the process versus what you want to do, right? What you actually just want to know. If it's not necessary to go to the very next stage, then don't ask. Put it on your list for when it's the right time. Okay, so again, next time I'm going to talk about how to know when the threat of a deal is real. So like looking at the risks of a deal, I'm noticing lab members getting hung up a lot here. I won't go into details because we'll talk about next time. Talking about seller meetings, actually building your offer, and then improving your investment post-close. Here's just a reminder about the free Acquisition Insights course, acquisitionlab.com/AM. And then we can open up for questions.
Boom. 12:29. Look at that, Chelsea. You did it.
Was that 25 minutes, like I said?
Yeah, I think so. I
I
so.
tried.
I probably stopped talking at 04:05. That was fantastic. Thank you, Chelsea. A lot of questions already. Let me ask in terms of so I think a lot of where buyers can go wrong in deal flow was focused on the tactics of it, and namely how to get listings from brokers. What do you tell? What about people who like? Are there any internal reasons that searchers get wrong? Like they don't realize how long this is going to take, or they.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, are there any things that aren't related to their broker outreach or the tactics about how they're interacting in their market that they get wrong? Kind of, I don't want to say mindset stuff.
No. I
but
mean, yes.
they're approaching the way in just kind of the wrong way. They're thinking about it the wrong way. I don't know. I don't know what I don't know. That's why I'm having a hard time asking the question.
No. It's literally the entire reason I kind of bulldozed our original week 2 intensive session is because, yes, there's a million reasons why people kind of get in their own way in getting deals done. It's typically about how your brain processes information, right? And kind of the behaviors that show up as a result of that, not just in your interactions with brokers and sellers, but also in just how you look at deals, how you evaluate deals, how you wait. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that when how to know if the threat is real. That's what that whole section's about.
Okay. All right. I would just an anecdote that I recall from a Matt Barnes guest on Acquiring Minds when you were talking about be memorable, Chelsea. This is probably one example among countless, but it always comes back to me. Matt, when he had effectively like a buyer profile that he sent to brokers, he would say no, like, XYZ, ABC, and no vice businesses, like no pot vaping stores or something. And he wasn't doing it as like a colorful detail. He's literally like, I don't want that type of business. But for whatever reason, brokers always remembered that. So when he would follow up with them, they'd be like, oh, you're the no pot guy. And it was just a great illustration of like how you just want to have, like you said, recency, or just like people aren't going to remember the five paragraph document you send them. They're going to remember 1 or 2 details at best about you. Mm-hmm. So if there can be something in some hook that jogs their memory about you, that would be good. And Matt Barnes just happened into his. He didn't even intentionally do it.
No, and it's a good. So one of the things that we talk about a lot in the lab that I feel like first-time buyers, especially ones that have imposter syndrome, which I'm not going to dive into all that here, but there is a again, bleed over from search funds. There is a belief that you need to present yourself as a capital company, right? Everything that you do is we, me and my partners, or, this is our goal. We're Atlantic Capital Company. Here's our website. And I think that people forget, again, that this is all about people, right? Relationships, and they depersonalize themselves. And then they're not memorable because they get lost in the sea of perceived PE people. And so I would not underestimate the value of representing yourself as a human, right? And this is what we talk about, obviously, in the intensive, but making sure that the broker sees a little piece of you, right? Because that's typically what they'll remember. That's why they remembered that he didn't want pot companies, right? It's like just a little piece of individuality
Mm-hmm.
is so much more powerful than, I'm looking for a home services business making $1 million in EBITDA, right?
Yeah.
Like, a lot of times when we do our buyer branding sessions, it's about figuring out what about you as a human needs to shine through, right? Maybe it's that you're a military, leader. Maybe it's that are passionate about the arts. Right? It's different for everybody. But you're not wrong, right? That's what people will remember.
Yeah. Yeah.
Another thing, Will, that I saw work, that I thought was really kind of thoughtful was when a buyer was evaluating listings, he would record just a quick loom, like we're talking 15-second loom about the listing, like, hey, love the business, and kind of like be scrolling through the listing and saying what he liked very concisely, what's better for him, and then he'd send it to the broker, and it just made him stand out, right? Like,
Yeah.
not, please God, the 200 and whatever people on the call don't go sending loom videos to everybody and their brother. But those are the kind of things that are going to make you stand out, right?
Yeah. Yeah. On that private equity point, I can hear people saying, yeah, but what if the seller that I'm approaching wants to sell to private equity? Well,
You're not
then
going
the
to be
problem,
paying like a private equity person. So,
then the point is you're not going to get that seller to sell to you
right.
anyway. So there's no real benefit to position yourself as private equity for the self-funded searcher crowd.
No, because the
Because
deal
you're going to
structure
be
is
found
better.
out because you're not private equity. So it just wastes
And
everybody's time.
I would say not the financially motivated sellers are going to want PE, right? But even anybody that's ever worked with them knows that they come in high and then negotiate you really low. So like it's a
Yeah.
mixed bag. Um, but the majority of people do not. So you're actually hurting yourself probably by turning more people off than that one, person that wanted a PE firm that you're not going to win anyway because PE firms will pay higher multiples.
Yeah. And one thing I think you touched on, forgive me if you said it directly and I missed it, but the technique with brokers is, so you talked about blanket emails a few times, Chelsea. You were talking about blanket emails to brokers locally to saying,
Like
hey, I'm
mass email
Chelsea,
campaigns. Yeah.
but to brokers.
Correct.
Where you didn't mean to business owners.
Honestly, it's kind of,
Because that's the traditional search fund
that's the
approach,
traditional
is
search
spamming
fund model.
owners.
Correct. Is just spamming owners, which again has a pretty low response rate. I think like we have a member right now that is trying desperately to buy a competitor. And so he just showed up. Right. And so sometimes I don't know. I don't love blanket emails. I think they get filtered by systems. I think that it's just not a great return rate. I don't love proprietary outreach either because I think it's not a great return on your time.
Right. But I'm just distinguishing between, this whole time you were not talking about so-called proprietary outreach, which
I
is
was talking about
blasting
broker outreach.
email
Correct.
owners. You were talking about broker outreach, but blanket broker outreach. And so the
Correct.
technique advocated by the lab is to reach out to brokers about a particular listing that they have live.
Correct.
And, even if you're maybe not probably going to buy that one, it is a conversation starter. You don't want to advocate wasting brokers' time if you know you're not going to buy that listing. But if you're looking like any kind of icebreaker, if you're looking for a way to get a broker's attention, what they are prioritizing is selling the listings they have. So that would be the way to jump to the top of their priority list.
Correct.
Right?
But if you're looking for like an HVAC company, and I hate using HVAC for an example, guys, but if you're looking for an accounting firm or any of the basics, reaching out to somebody that has listings for restaurants, not a great move, right? So like it does need to be tangentially something that you would maybe want to pursue, right? Like I'm not saying to go out and like request and inflate and mislead brokers. But yeah, I would say it doesn't have to be something you're like 100% sure you're interested in, right? Again, this is a lot of academic exercise too, right? Of just starting the conversations with the brokers, looking at listings for, you know, the educational purpose too. So it doesn't have to be perfect, but I don't think if
Yeah,
it's
that's a good
not at all interesting to you, then don't. That's to me
Yeah.
a waste of, you're wasting their time, and that's disrespectful.
Yeah. Okay. And what do you tell people, Chelsea, who basically have exhausted all of these channels? Because even, you know, you can pretty, especially if you don't live in a major metropolitan, even if you live in a major metropolitan area, you know, you can pretty quickly exhaust the listed businesses for sale, period. And even the pocket listings. So at some point you don't have anything to do. And do you then advocate going down the list on the list of things that are techniques that are effective and eventually starting cold outreach? Or do you just kind of say, do you advocate them just kind of waiting and being patient? And I don't know. What do you say?
I feel like, again, this is like super anecdotal, guys. It's not based in any research that I've done. I feel like if you have exhausted all of those efforts and you have found nothing, I would have to ask questions, right? If we're talking about not finding anything, not putting LOIs in, then like that's what we're going to talk about next month. I don't think the deal flow is the problem. If you have exhausted all your efforts, you've submitted a gazillion LOIs, I still don't think that that the deal flow is the issue, right? And so the reason why we talk about mindset, Will, the questions you were asking earlier about are there any reasons why broker or why, you know, searchers might not find success? Yes. Right. I think that it's very easy to point to deal flow as the issue, but a lot of times it's actually the buyer, right? The buyer is not getting out of their own way in a variety of ways. And so I would have to dive in to make sure that there isn't another reason why someone's not buying before I thought that there's literally no businesses for you.
Great. Okay. A lot of questions here. So let me keep going. If a listing is represented by an investment banker as opposed to a business broker, is it safe to assume the buyer would prefer a private equity firm acquire them? And maybe define the distinction there, Chelsea, between an investment banker and a business broker,
I
which is
mean,
fuzzy.
well, and that's the problem, is it is actually fuzzy. So people call themselves whatever the hell they want. Traditionally, investment bankers, yes, are representing a different type of to a different market. But I have investment bankers that are selling to self-funded searchers now, so I don't know that that necessarily applies. I would say still pursue it. You can very easily ask. There's a lot of times you can tell in the price, if there's a listed price, who they're targeting, right? If it's a really high multiple, they're typically targeting a strategic acquirer or, you know, a PE fund. But a lot of times you can tell in the language of the listing, but you can still read, like there's no harm in reaching out. You don't know if there's anybody interested in buying them, right? They may want that, but you know, they would rather just have, what is it, bird in the hand. And so you might as well reach out and start a conversation. Because I will tell you guys, this market has gotten even muddier in the last 5 years. Because I feel like anyone that has read any of this stuff is now trying to represent deals. And so they're calling themselves all kinds of new names. And so I wouldn't assume that something represented by an investment banker wants a PE. I guess it depends on the deal size as well.
It probably though is directionally an indication of deal size of how big that business is going to be.
It should be, yes. Like you should know, right? Typically, PE fund things targeted at PE funds are going to be at 2 million in EBITDA or more from a traditional perspective. They are going lower now, where they'll buy something at 500,000, but like investment bankers aren't, they're expensive. They're not going to take
Right.
deals typically for that at that size.
Right. A couple of people asking Chelsea about having a full-time job and doing a search, and any techniques to manage that time. It's basically, how do you manage your time? But Have you seen any effective techniques in the lab?
Yeah, I mean, most of our members are part-time searchers, to be honest, right? They are working full-time, they have families. You just, like I said, you have to make it a priority. And sometimes that means sacrificing things you don't want to sacrifice to make it work. The other thing that is a kind of a hack, for lack of better words, is a lot of times they hire VAs, right? And you can have somebody help you with the more tedious stuff so that you don't have to do it all. Um, but at the end of the day, when I look at the difference between closers and people that haven't closed, one of the biggest indicators is that they had competing priorities, right? And you have to be willing to do all the stuff that you have to do to actually close.
I would also say to these folks, like, if you do end up getting a good list, happening upon a good listing, or there's a good listing that comes to market, one that you want, somebody else is also going to be looking at it as well, and they're going to move quickly. I mean,
Correct.
everybody else, it's a competitive market, which gets the crux of this whole session. So if you're not able to prioritize your search, or just drop everything to react to a listing that you find or something that you need to do, you're at a disadvantage, because somebody else out there is going to be prepared to do that, because they're actively or full-time searching. I'm not advocating that everybody quit and do this full-time. Just recognize what you're up against. That you're not doing this in a vacuum. You are, imagine 10 other of you, if you're in a big market, 10 other of you also searching for the same type of business.
Well, and I think it's important to recognize some of our lab members will step down, right? They'll take lesser demanding jobs. So if they were in like a leadership position that was very demanding, they'll take an analyst position, right? They can keep the lights on and pay their bills, but we'll give them greater flexibility. Some of them will take sabbaticals, right? Some of them will take leaves of absence. And so it's figuring out what works for your family. But at the end of the day, yes, it just comes down to it's a priority and you have to make it that. Maybe it means you have to call off work one day, right? Like you just have to do stuff. I hate it to sound so simple, but it is literally that. You have to do the things to get the things you want, right?
Yeah.
And act very, very quickly. People are way too reluctant to submit LOIs. Like I'll talk to members and they're like, oh yeah, I've been thinking about submitting this LOI. I'm like, how long have you been looking at this listing? And it's like, oh, about 2 weeks ago. I'm like, it's probably like you're already behind. If it's a good deal, right? You're probably now already behind the curveball. So you want to try to act quickly.
Yeah. Elliot Holland of Guardian Due Diligence, who I know has presented in the lab, who's a due diligence firm, has this line that is "send the damn LOI" that he tells searchers, because he just knows, he sees time and again that there is this psychological barrier to people doing that. It feels committal, even though it's non-committal.
Well, and there's a struggle.
It's a good exercise for you to do, to get to your point, Chelsea, to just have done it, to like break the seal in your own psychology, to have just done that once and move on with your life, because otherwise you'll just see it as too much of a step to take.
No, and people will get hung up on like, well, how do I know what to offer if I don't think that the SDE value is what it is and blah, blah. It's like, base it off of the information being provided, right? If you think it's a different SDE, then fine, make an offer based on whatever you think it is, but you don't have to provide the level of specificity you see in legal templates for LOIs. You don't. You can submit an LOI that just says, I'm willing to pay this price in a combination of bank financing, personal capital, and potentially seller financing if necessary, right? Like it can be generic so that you can take action. I think what hangs people up in submitting LOIs rightfully is the concern about, because a lot of these templates, ours included, right, will have purchase price broken down and all the details. You just don't have to do that, right? You can act quickly and just say, I'm willing to pay this price based on the information being provided. And then the other thing I wanted to share when I mentioned about like shitty LOI or CIMs, if a bank or if a broker is providing a CIM has inflated revenue or inflated earnings, or half of it is add backs that aren't really legit, they are inviting you to renegotiate, right? It is now, it's on them because they chose to put forth a bad CIM. And so you are acting on the information provided to you. If that information provided is untrue and you find it to be untrue, then now you get to renegotiate, and they can't get mad about it because that's on them, right? And so don't get hung up on trying to validate it before you submit an LOI. just know that now it's to your favor, right? Like, yes, I would have loved to pay you this if the numbers were right, but they're not. And so now this is what I can pay you. So don't let that hang you up.
I did a webinar a couple weeks ago with Johannes Hawk, who has a really interesting approach to this, which is he doesn't pay attention to what the listed price of a business is at all. Doesn't matter what it is. He sees what the reported earnings are, and then or the claimed earnings, and then he looks at the other characteristics of the business and tries to gauge if it's low quality, medium quality, or high quality. And if it's low quality, he sends over an IO, and then he has a multiple that he'll attach for each of those quality tiers. And then he just sends over a quick IOI, basically a very brief document. IOI is even less commitment than an LOI. I mean,
It's just an email.
It's just an email, although he does put it in an attachment, but just to make it feel a little bit more official. But it's effectively a very brief Word doc. And he basically says, here's what we're willing to offer for this business. If it feels like kind of a low quality, problematic business, call it 3x of whatever the reported earnings are. Are we in the ballpark here? And then if it's a higher quality business, he'll take it to 4.5x. And he'll blanket. I mean, he'll send out a lot of those, and then the responses will come in, and it's a way of gauging if there's even a conversation to be had. So he talks a lot about, Chelsea, a theme that you did in today's presentation, getting to know quickly. And so he's all about getting to know.
Correct.
And so it's not, it's easy to approach this process as getting to yes. Actually, what you want to do is disqualify, get to know. So, but there was a few takeaways in this monologue, but the biggest one for everybody is one way to turn this process on its head is to disregard completely what the for sale price is and just make an offer based on what you think you would be willing to pay.
And Will, that's just fact, right? Like we talk about that it's later in the presentation for next month, but like it's all fat math and logic. At the end of the day, your offer is what it's worth to you, and it doesn't matter what they're asking, because if it doesn't support the economics of your deal, then it doesn't matter, And so I'm with him, right? Like figure out what it's worth to you. It has to meet your financial objectives.
Great. Okay. Let's see here. Let's do these are common important features of the lab. How do you talk about your ability to finance a deal that demonstrate that you have the wherewithal to pull it off financially?
Proof of fund letters, your PFS, like you can fill out the SBA PFS and submit it. We do pre-approval letters for all of our members, and so they submit their pre-approval letter with the buyer profile when they're having interactions with folks. But any of it works. Personal balance sheet, whatever, you just have to show them that you can finance it.
Okay. And in terms of your buyer profile, I know this is a bit of secret sauce for the lab, but is there anything that you can share or about what few people are asking about it?
Yeah, I mean, for us, we just did the session actually with cohort 49 last night, but it's very much, it's critical that you control the narrative. So our buyer profile is designed not just for brokers and sellers, but for underwriters, right? And so you just need to control the narrative and paint a very clear picture as to why you are qualified to do what you're trying to do. That's where I feel like people go wrong. I'll get buyer profiles sent from non-members. And granted, I did this kind of stuff prior to starting the lab for people that were trying to jump industries, but you just need to lead them through the journey, right? So your buyer profile, what makes you qualified is more important to me than anything, right? And so I don't love resumes for that purpose. And so I know that people get hung up on like making them pretty or making them one page. But if it doesn't tell me why you're qualified to do what you're trying to do, I don't care. Do you know what I mean? From a risk perspective, as either a seller or a broker or an underwriter, I don't care. If you can't show me that you've ever led a team or done something directly related to the business you're trying to buy, I'm not convinced, right? I'm probably gonna pick somebody that is clearer about their ability to execute this.
And to be clear, everybody, the buyer profile is literally a document that the lab helps you prepare, and it's not exclusive to the lab. Other people use this strategy, but it's kind of like your buyer resume, but it is not your formal resume. But
Yeah, so we have
it's
an
a
advisor
positioning document.
correct. We have an advisor that works with you to build. It's like a strategic positioning document. It serves the purpose of a resume. So like when lenders ask for a resume, you can use it. Because it technically is a functional resume. Just people are used to chronological resumes. So yeah.
Great. Now here's one for you, Chelsea. So this is this one you'll have some bias in answering this question, which please be transparent about. What are your thoughts on hiring a buy-side broker or buy-side advisor, as they're known, that sell deal sourcing services? And if you define that, please, for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, traditionally, buy-side advisors were hired, paid a monthly retainer. They searched on your behalf. They coached you through the process, and then they got a success fee, right? So it was like, $150,000 at the end of it. They had their purpose, right? They were, and I think this is further in my presentation too. We are just, talking a ton about, things that I want to talk about. So I love that. Traditionally, they were heavily connected, and that's why you picked them, right? Actually, I feel like no, I had a conversation in our Facebook group about this. Buy-side advisors were people that had been doing it for a long time, right? So you were paying them for their connections, for the credibility of like working with them, and that's why they were $150,000. I feel, again, Chelsea's feelings, not fact, that what is being presented as buy-side advisory now is not necessarily that. It's people that are basically doing everything that we teach our members to do, which is just go look, hunt the deals and do all the things that we talked about earlier. And they're just doing it on your behalf. And that's very different for me, right? You could pay a VA to do that, and it's a hell of a lot cheaper than a lot of these people are charging. And so I don't see why you would need a buy-side advisor unless you're like growing through acquisition and you're wanting somebody to reach out to competitors and like advocate on your behalf and serve more of like a advisor on, and I came out of growth through acquisition land, but like they're working more on your behalf about helping you navigate growing your existing business through acquisition. And like, is this a cultural match? And like, they're just more of a strategic thought partner. I feel, God, I feel awful saying this because I don't know this, but like, I feel like people that are selling that service right now are not actual advisors the way that it used to be advertised. They're literally just running a process for you. And I feel like that's probably unnecessary.
May I make the case for them, Chelsea, and you won't hold it against me?
I will absolutely not hold it against you.
So I don't know about the term advisor versus
That's
not,
where I'm getting hung up.
or the history. Maybe there was a different value prop in the past that was richer than it is today. But I've had a couple of guests who use buy-side advisors, brokers. And I mean, the headline of why not to use them is because they're very expensive.
Correct.
They are many thousands of dollars. Basically, there's a success fee of some percentage of the deal, which if you buy a multi-million-dollar business, it's going to be in the low hundreds of thousands of dollars. But you finance that, so it comes out, so you don't pay it, out of your pocket. But what you do pay out of pocket is most typically the model is that you're paying them a retainer, a flat fee every month that is steep, while they're searching the business, searching for an opportunity for you. it does make sense, because otherwise, they want to know that you're real. You have skin in the
Correct.
game. You're paying $2, $3, $5,000 a month to have their team be searching on your behalf. But then if they do find an opportunity for you that you close on, all of that money that you've already paid to them for those retainers,
Goes towards that.
you can apply to
Correct.
their fee. So it's actually nice alignment there. But you have to ask yourself, searcher, how much cash do you have? $2, $3, $4, $5,000 a month to spend on this? The guests that I've had that did it were, to some of the questioners who are part-time searchers. One who comes to mind, you can listen to his episode. Will Gano, Gano, was in a, had a great, well-paying job at a Fortune 500. It's not Fortune 500 because I think it's a private company. Cargill, which is a giant food business in the Midwest, like a giant business, privately held. Anyway, so he just didn't have the time. There was no way he was going to have the time. And so but he had the balance, or the income to be able to support it. It was basically like, can I stop working I don't know what he was making. He didn't share, but let's call it $200,000 a year salary. Can I forego that to search on my own? Or can I pay this this buy-side advisor $60,000 a year to find me a deal? And then I continue with my job, and I'm down to 140 as opposed to down to zero. And by the way, I can apply all of that I can apply that $60,000 to the completion fee. And so that was his calculus. But I think that it's only somebody who already is making frankly, already has a great income can do this. That's really what it boils down to.
Yeah, and I by no means am I saying not to do it, right? Like you're more than welcome to. I just don't see the need, because even that scenario, you could pay a VA to do pretty much anything, much less, if they're not already heavily connected, right? And that's what you're paying for, is that heavy connection to right? So they're going to be finding high quality deal flow for you. They're going to be bringing years of experience. I would pay for that personally, right? If they're bringing years of experience and they're going to be really advising me through the process all day long, that's worthwhile. But if it's just what I feel like is being represented a lot now, you could get away with it a hell of a lot cheaper than $5,000 a month. Plus
that's a great point, Chelsea. And the group that he used was kind of entrenched in this world, also based in the Midwest.
And it's worth it. It is worth it.
A lot of people. And the other thing about them versus VA is that they also have a bunch of other clients they're searching for. So they might be kicking up deals that don't work for client A, but do work for you. So you're kind of benefiting from all of these contemporaneous searches that they're doing for other clients as well. Potentially, so goes the theory.
That's the sell.
Unlike a virtual assistant where they're just working just for you. But yes, this expertise point, or being connected in the small business community and actively searching for other people, is a great point. Okay, we're at 1:00, so just time for a few more questions. Chelsea, 56 questions have come in. So
I'm not answering any of them. I'm done. I hate you all. No, it's fine. Anybody else that has questions that we don't get to, I will answer them after the session, either through written or video replies, just so that you know. That's a lot of questions.
Yeah. 4 people have asked what VA is, virtual assistant.
Sorry, yeah.
Guys, yeah, virtual assistant.
Like you can hire them on Upwork or Fiverr.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so do you want to answer a couple more now, Chelsea, or should we?
Yeah,
okay,
absolutely.
We'll answer a couple more now. But just to be clear, what Chelsea said, she's done this for past webinars, incredibly valuable. She's going to look at all of these questions. Maybe she's not going to get to all 50 of them or 45 that we went unanswered, and record looms of herself answering them, and then put them on a Vimeo page. That'll go out. I don't know if that'll make it into the first email. Maybe we'll send a second email, because that might take you some days, Chelsea, to do. And I want to make sure to get this recording out ASAP.
But I will answer all of them. I don't ever let anybody's answer go in unless it's inappropriate. Then I'm probably not going to acknowledge it. But yes, if it's a valid question, I will absolutely answer it. I promise.
Okay. Has anyone gone through the lab after filing Chapter 7 and secured non-traditional funding?
Yes, but you have to wait the 7 years. Most people won't invest or lend to you until it's clean.
Okay. Um,
Oh, and it
eh,
can't,
yeah, go ahead.
sorry. The chapter 7 that I had was divorce related, not business acquisition related. So if it was business acquisition related, that my answer might be different.
Yeah. I have had a guest, Jeff, um, who had gone through bankruptcy and then proceeded to buy a business. So let me share with you guys that. I mean, he had to wait 10 years,
Correct.
um,
Correct.
or some number of years.
I think it's 7. I think. I could be
And
wrong.
I think that sounds right. In his case, it might not have been exactly 7. I just put that into the chat for you, everybody. So he talks in there about returning to business acquisition after having gone through bankruptcy. Okay, let me see. Oh, here's a classic question we get all the time, but a good one. Many searchers do not have any relevant experience in the industry. How do I get comfortable with that risk? Many seem to be able to underwrite that risk with no problem.
Yeah, it's a personal choice, right? So when anything I say doesn't mean you can't do the opposite, right? There are people that do literally everything I said not to do and buy. For me, it's just about mitigating your risk, right? So like if you have done everything you can to keep the risk low in every other area, then maybe that's the area that you're comfortable introducing risk in. It's a personal choice. I would argue you should not buy a company um, I think there are some companies that are going to be easier to get your arms around, and then there are companies that you'd have no business buying. That's just Chelsea's opinion, right? Like we had a member come in with a deal in hand. He bought some kind of a geothermal engineering company. He chose not to go through the intensive because the deal he was working at when he joined closed. He ended up selling it 6 months later because it was not a fit. It was too technical. And so I do think that there's risk that maybe isn't worth it in highly technical acquisitions. Again, people do it all the time. That's a choice you can make. But I would argue find something that's a better fit.
Right.
Not the most popular answer, I realize, but that's my answer.
Well, here's another popular one for you, Chelsea. Is hiring a GM to enable you to buy more businesses and create a holding company over the long term a bad idea? How important is it to be day to day in the business in the short to medium term?
Short term, very important if you're buying with debt, right? Because you need to know the business. I love this question because I always feel like anyone that's hired people knows how hard it would be to hire someone to run a company you know nothing about, right? Like you don't even know what characteristics to look for in an operator if you don't know the business, right? And so you should expect to be in there, get to know the business, know what you're looking for, and then put an operator in place within, 12 to 18 months, and then move on to the next company. Walker doesn't operate the companies he buys. I'm the operator of the company he started. He has operators in all the businesses he bought. I think the only one I guess he operated in the beginning and then put operators in place when I think about the timeline of it. And so you should expect to be in a business, learn it, make sure it all works, make sure the pieces work, establish yourself as the owner, and then put a GM in place, 12 to 18 months after closing. That's my hypothesis. The whole concept of like, I'm going to buy operators and keep my job makes me nauseous.
I tend to agree. I mostly agree. I have had guests who've done it, and I did a webinar with one, Matthew Saskin, how to buy a business and hire a GM while doing so and place the GM. And Matthew kept his day job. However, Matthew is still very involved in the business that he acquired. He's a very capable guy. He couldn't walk away from his W-2 because he was making didn't make sense. So there's a lot of caveats to him, and he is an exception. He's the exception that proves the rule. It is not, unless you are really an exceptional case in some way, it is really not a good idea.
It's so risky. Again, if you're not buying with debt, do whatever the hell you want. Just be comfortable burning money, right? Like it's fine. But if you're buying with debt, it's just and I mean this with like all the love in my heart, and I don't mean to sound like a mean person, but like it's borderline negligent to me to like buy a
Exactly.
company and have know nothing about it. Like the SBA would absolutely kill you if they ever found that out. They wouldn't lend to you, right?
Yeah.
Like that's the worst investment ever. Ever.
Exactly. Lenders are you're gonna bump up against resistance with your lenders, for
Mhm.
one thing. For another, even if you're already independently wealthy and just want to play private equity guy, it is negligent. You don't want to run a company into the ground. Those are people in that company. That's a
Well, and
brand.
that's
They're customers.
what's
You
driving me
you could
crazy.
really run it into the ground thinking that you're too cool for school. So
I
this
I
is
think
not that.
that's
Yeah.
what is really hurting me about this market personally, like borderline, like very deeply, because it's like everyone is acting like so flippantly about buying businesses. And I am an IO psychologist. I took an oath to do no harm. Like they're going to do harm to these communities if they don't understand that these are like organisms and complex systems. And it's not just risking bankruptcy for you, right? You could be risking bankruptcy for other people when they lose their jobs or your suppliers. And so anyway, I think I wish people would act like this is a little bit different, right? I wish that there was a little bit more severity to how people are talking about it. I feel like they're making light of how serious it is to buy a company.
Yeah, exactly. It is serious. And to be clear, like if you question or have the aspiration to build a holdco, I'm not dissuading that
No,
aspiration. There are plenty of acquiring minds guests who are building holdcos, but they are people who go about it. There's a way of going about it the right way, and there's a way
yes.
of going about it the social media ridiculous ass way, inspo Instagram way, which is like bada bing, bada boom. I have a holdco now. No, my people who've done holdcos at acquiring minds bought one company or probably already had operational chops. But if they didn't, they bought a
Yes.
company, they got in there, and for a few hard years, learned how to be an operator, learned how to hire a GM, stepped out, were much more mature in their business capabilities, and then bought a second company, doing it the right way, the gradual way.
Can
And
I
then, yeah, they can, and they imagine doing this for their careers. This is what they
correct?
want to do. It's not this cool thing that they can brag about doing on the side. It's really what they're committed to because they love business and they love both operations and capital allocation, and they're trying to blend the two.
Can I clarify? So there is a way to do this well. If you want to hold your job and you want to own companies and have operators, go to your network. Like the right way to do this is to go find your operators and buy companies for them. That's the right way to do it, right? Not to buy companies and find random operators that you don't know. So we have a
Hmm.
ton of members come in, right? And they're the money and they have operators that are going to be the day-to-day person. Like that all day long is a safe way to do this.
Oh,
Just to be clear.
well, give us, I know we got to go here, but give us 30 seconds on that model. So if I'm somebody who has money and I don't want to operate, one way that you, Chelsea, are a believer in this is to recruit an operator and then find a business for that individual
Correct. And that's
first.
what
So
Walker does.
operator first and
It's
then
operator
business.
first, business second. Like
That's interesting. We should do a
he
webinar on that model.
but it's
I'm
true,
serious.
right? It's like you have a network of people you trust that you've worked with, right? And so if you have somebody in mind where you're like they would be a great operator, find out if they'd be interested in doing this with you, right? And then you go and buy and they're the operator, but you're picking a company that's right for their skills and their background. And then I would argue, and again, I feel bad for saying this. I had a woman tell me she felt like I was trying to talk her out of doing this, but I'm not. It just if you don't have skills and experience that are relevant and you want to do this, go get skills and experience that's relevant. And then do it after you get the skills and right? Like that's how you do it low risk. We talk about all the saboteurs that can prevent you from being successful. One of them is hyperachiever. And so like don't again stacking risk. Like if you're not 89 gonna die tomorrow, there's time, right, to go and do this in a least risky way. And that might mean going to try to be an operator at a small business in your area if you can afford to take a pay cut or whatever. And sometimes those companies pay really well. So like pay cuts may not be necessary. And so if you don't feel like you have skills and experience, go get it. And then go buy a company. Maybe buy that company. Wouldn't that be stellar with seller financing without a personal guarantee? I love that scenario. Go do that.
There are a couple of opportunities just like that on Smithlist right now,
Go
smithlist.com,
to
everybody, which is,
smithlist.com and
yeah,
find those opportunities.
yeah. Yeah, there are opportunities on there where there's an owner, often a searcher owner, who bought a business, now wants an operator. And in more than one case, they're like, and I also envision this operator, after we've grown the business how I want to, 3 or 5 years, being the person I potentially
Exit.
sell it to. So you're building operational experience, you're getting to know the business, building 3 and 5 years rapport with your seller, who's going to be your boss, helping them grow the business, and then you're first in line to be the buyer of the same business. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Chelsea, here's a lob here. If I want to meet other searchers, what would be the best way to go about doing so?
I would recommend that you join Acquisition Lab. But in all seriousness, like just delve into, there's an ecosystem here, right? Find the ecosystem in your community and lean into it. That ecosystem could be Acquisition Lab if you're a fit, or there's a gazillion other options out there. So yeah, check out
Local
Acquisition
meetups.
Lab.
I mean,
Yeah.
there's probably meetups. It would depends on where you live, but there are meetups in a bunch of big cities and less big cities.
Yeah.
There's tons of people online. You follow me on LinkedIn, searchfunder.com.
Yes, Search Funder is a great resource.
A lot of people talk about this on Twitter, although Twitter, algorithms constantly changing the vibes on Twitter, but still a lot of people there who do this. So yeah, there's lots of places. All right. So now you're up to 65 questions, Chelsea. So maybe you'll only have to record answers to 50 or so.
All right,
but
perfect.
we gotta let Chelsea go, everyone. Thank you so much for another great session. Chelsea, thank you so much. We'll see you in a month. And thank you everyone for coming and your attention and your questions. This concludes the webinar.
Thanks. Bye, everybody.